Welcome to Beyond Names on a Screen. Thanks for joining us today. Hi, I'm Lori, and this is Amber, and we're going to be talking about building human connections in your online courses. And to start out with, just a quick story. When I first was teaching my first class many, many years ago, it was a face-to-face class, but my mother, who was a lifelong teacher, she gave me a book by Parker Palmer, The Courage to Teach. And it's like, I need courage to teach. I learned quickly, yes, every time you come into a classroom or you start your online class, it's a little bit of flutter of how am I going to share what I know and what I hope they are learning and sharing with each other. We all need courage to teach. So Parker Palmer's book is in my last slide here to move forward. Okay, Amber's going to handle that. So today with online courses, we face a lot of challenges. It's an exciting area to work in because we know enrollments are really expanding with online. Students want to, even though they're on campus or in town here or close to the community, they want online classes a lot. How do we make them work for everybody in the same way as you have people in the room like we have here? So online students are less likely to have the instructor rapport, and they're more likely saying that they teach themselves. Students a lot of times are just names on a screen, and we need to recognize that they're just names on the screen. They are people. Students bring in online courses diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives. There's an equity gap. Online learning disproportionately affects students that are non-majority groups, first-time learners, all of those are the ones become less engaged, that it affects them. And human connection, if we do that right, in a good way, that they see us as human and we're connecting to each other, it helps to prevent that emotional disengagement that happens. So this presentation is built on a lot to do with some books that are more frequently coming out online, but Michelle Pacansky-Brock is a big contributor to what this is all about, and she's put together the foundation for core principles we as instructors need to think about. We need to build trust with the students. Students need to build trust with us. We need to create a presence that we're there. It's not just an announcement in a course. It's talking to them in different ways in an online environment. As we heard a question in our opening panels, like, how do you do this with asynchronous? Because asynchronous is really asynchronous. We're not together at the same time. We can do that. We can still build that humanness and presence as instructors. Awareness, who the students are, that matters to those. As I shared in the first slide, they come from diverse backgrounds. There's different reasons on why they're taking an online course. And they may be from out of the country. They may be in the street right next to you in the house near you. And then empathy, seeing things through the student eyes. We get these surveys that we do with students, like what's working in this class, what's not working in this class. Oh, one of the things that's not working, you gave too much homework. Somebody else says you gave just the right amount of homework. You know, it's never perfect, but we also listen to them and we share the empathy, or think about, yes, that they have a family, they have jobs they're working at, so many things going on in their lives. So it's not one size fits all. STEM is a really hard area to work with. And we need to think about, and I don't want to pick out that this doesn't happen, but we did a book study a few years ago, and there was a physics professor that was part of our book study talking about inclusion. And he was saying that in physics, It's sort of like the old school of you make things as hard as possible to weed out the people that are not going to be there. And generally it's men that stay. It's very hard to keep women. And this is some years ago, so I don't want to point out anything. But in the STEM classes in the past, it's been, those are the ones that are more cited as not teaching well. And that's why people drop out. It's the straight lecture, hard exams, maybe a midterm and a final, and not getting the connection with the instructor. And think about that online, even harder to get those connections. So we've heard some really great examples of teaching science classes here today already. And so there's lots of ways we can do this now. So think about that. The very last bullet point, weeks 0 through 1 are the best times to get connected with your student. There's a study out by Civitas that shows that if you connect and have students do something within the first 0 to 1 week, they have like an 80% higher chance of being successful in the course. You're connecting with them. So do a discussion, do a survey, do something to make that connection, have them engage somehow with your course, with you, and share something about themselves. Additional research, positive student-instructor relationships. When I run a faculty development session for teachers, the first day I always ask them, think back to your best teacher ever. It doesn't take long that they come up with, it was this teacher in chemistry that really connected with me, and now I'm teaching chemistry. It really makes a difference. You can come back to that one person, and why was it? It was because they saw me as a person, not just as a number of somebody in the class. So when students know the instructors believe in them, they perform at higher levels. I had one master's class, I think it was, the instructor comes in, everybody has an A. You're here, you're master students, you're in a doctoral program or something, whatever it was. And he said, you all have an A. So you just have to keep it going because I believe you can do it. If you're not doing the work, then you're bringing it down. So believe in them that they can do it. Provide them with things that make sense, but also give them things to do that are at a higher level because you do believe in them. So this is Michelle Pacansky-Brock again, the internet connected little diagram of doing that trust, the awareness, the empathy, and the presence. They all blend together. If you're sharing a present, you're building that trust. If you're hearing what they're saying, you're realizing that empathy, that you're understanding things when they make connections.
All right, thanks, Lori. I'm going to talk about some easy ways that you can incorporate this into your courses. One of the easiest ways to start, especially in an online course, is having a genuine welcome for your students. So in face-to-face classes, they get to naturally learn about you as you teach. With the stories you tell, the expertise you have, just your personality comes out in person. But in online, they don't provide that same informal interaction. So a welcome video allows your students to hear your voice, see your personality, and start building a connection early in the course. Sharing a brief story and showing just your enthusiasm for your content can help create a more welcoming and approaching learning environment. We had a great story actually just this morning. Somebody was talking about an instructor had a GoPro and they like to bike. And so they would make videos while they were biking with their GoPro. And that'd just be a way of your students connecting with you. I like to think of it as greeting your students at the door. When I was teaching in person, I'd always notice a difference in my students when I was able to greet them at the doorway. This welcome to your course would be that, meeting your students at the door. And even online, that little small moments can make your students feel comfortable participating in your course. Another helpful element is a getting started module. So students can sometimes feel overwhelmed during that first week. They might be unsure where to begin or where to find all that important information. So if you have a well-organized module, it reduces that uncertainty that sets students up for success right away. and you can put your welcome message in there, your syllabus, your course schedule. Course navigation is really helpful in an online course too, so they know where to find everything for your course. And then student resources, if you have them all in one place, it helps them spend less time finding things and more time focusing on learning. You can also use this space for including a low stakes icebreaker. So in the semester, students are uncertain and nervous. They might not know anybody in their online course. So you can put in a simple prompt, like put in a meaningful photo and tell us why it's important to you. Have them describe a place that makes them feel calm or motivated. And again, they can connect through that shared experience and start building community. If you have them make it an audio or video response, that just helps those interactions feel more personal, and they can get to know each other by hearing each other's voices, seeing each other's faces, and their personality can come out in the way that it can't in text. Another element is a confidential getting to know you survey at the start of the semester. This gives students a private space to share any concerns they may have about the course, any learning needs they have, or questions that they need answered that they don't want to ask publicly. It can also help your instructors help understand the responsibilities that students have, like Lori mentioned, outside of the classroom. Maybe it's their work schedule, maybe it's family responsibilities that they have to balance along with their schoolwork. It'll help you relate to them and have that empathy towards your students. And it will also help your students know that you care about those outside responsibilities and are willing to work with them. Questions you could ask would be like, what might interfere with your success in this course? Or what can I do to support your learning? So it communicates you care about their experience as a person, not just as a student who's going to complete assignments for you. And then small opportunities can help build trust and connection in your course. Some more elements are building that connection and engagement. It should continue through the entire semester. So Lori mentioned weeks 0 to 1 are the optimal beginning interaction time, but you want to keep continuing that throughout the entire semester. One way to do this is through informal videos. So again, like that GoPro example, including your pets, your kids, whatever your hobbies are, something that would help them interact with you. But informal videos can be these little check-ins where you introduce upcoming topics. You can clarify common questions that you get every semester, or you can talk through concepts students often find challenging. These videos help them feel your continued presence in the course. So even if you're asynchronous, having that video or that audio of you helps them know you're there still. And it can make your environment feel more interactive and supportive. Micro lectures are another helpful element. Our students are living in a time of TikTok and influencers and watching very brief videos. So if you can take a complex topic, something that's difficult for your students to understand, and break it down into micro lectures, would be very helpful. Make sure they're short, focused, and that they guide your students through the process. They're especially useful if you notice students struggling with the same content from semester to semester. Incorporating role models and relatable examples can help increase students' confidence and sense of belonging. When students see examples of people they identify with and they are succeeding in the field or discipline you work in, it can make their own goals feel more achievable. Provide warm, wise feedback is another important component of relationship building. I know I skipped it on here because we're going to be talking about it more on the next slide. So warm, wise feedback is feedback that communicates both support and high expectations. The goal is to help students understand that you're challenging them because you believe they're capable of succeeding. This can be especially important in online courses where written feedback may sometimes feel impersonal or easy to misinterpret. The first major assignment or exam is often especially important because it can shape your students' confidence and sense of belonging early in the semester. And then just to continue throughout with the major assignments that you have, providing this warm, wise feedback. For example, instead of simply pointing out a mistakes, feedback might sound like, this concept is challenging for many students at first, but I know you can master it with practice. And I noticed an error in step 2, so let's walk through that section together for the next time you work on this. Feedback framed this way acknowledges the challenge while also reinforcing confidence in the student's ability to improve. Students are more likely to stay engaged when they feel feedback is intended to support their growth rather than just evaluate their performance. Humanizing practices is also important from an equity perspective because they help students feel seen, supported, and valued within the learning environment. Many students spend a great deal of mental energy wondering whether they belong in college at all or whether they're capable of succeeding. That uncertainty can interfere with learning and their engagement. And when you create an intentionally welcoming space that's supportive, it reduces that sense of uncertainty and allows students to focus on learning. Small actions such as personal communication, relationship building, and supportive feedback can have a meaningful impact on students' confidence and participation. Same time, humanizing practices do not lower expectations. Instead, they combine high standards with clear support and encouragement, communicating to students they're capable of success and that we believe in their ability to meet those expectations. Ultimately, humanizing online learning is about creating courses where students feel connected, supported, and empowered to learn. So for some next steps, we have of those elements that we listed today, picking one or two of those to try and implement this next semester. You don't need to do them all. We know you have a lot to do all the time with your courses, especially getting ready for a new semester. So just pick one or two that really kind of felt like something that was you and you could incorporate into your class. These are all low-tech suggestions. Many of this stuff is already in Blackboard and you can just use it. If you need help with that, of course, contact any of us at the IDC. We'd love to work with you to how you could add these into your course, but they're all in Blackboard to help you already. And then just pay attention to your students, get that feedback from them, see if you're losing any engagement, and then use that to alter your course for the next time you run it. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer. We got done a little early, I guess.
And went through that research kind of fast. There was just one. Oh, we've got one back there already. Great. While you're walking, I'll just throw something out that Hack over here asked a question earlier about how do you do things and keep these activities going in online courses. And I visited with her after it, but creating maybe a virtual learning community where you assign 3 to 5 students as a group. It's asynchronous, but they've got to figure out their time because just because they're online and asynchronous doesn't mean that they can't do homework all the time and figure things out. They can still meet themselves and provide summaries, assign like writing partners so that every paper they're writing or discussion they're doing, they have somebody to go back and forth with it. Maybe have a homework partner thinking about your STEM courses, have somebody, maybe 3, and they create those groups online. They're all living in different places and maybe it takes a while for them to work it out, but it's part of something that we're asked to, we have as an objective in our learning is help them learn how to work with each other, to be leaders and to be a part of teams. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions for you. My first is you mentioned this idea of having micro lectures, and I love the idea in theory. However, I have content. We want to make sure that they're getting the content, right? I come from a health profession, so I want to make sure that they're getting the right information to take their national exam. And so then my lectures end up being 30, 40 minutes long. Do you have any recommendations on how to balance that? And then my second question is, you talked about an icebreaker, and I think that's a really interesting idea. Can you talk about maybe examples of icebreakers that you've used in the past that have worked really well?
I guess there's been a few, like if you have them, emojis are such a huge thing, right? People communicate in emojis. So then you could have them put emojis and then talk about what those emojis mean in relation to themselves. That kind of tends to be a quick, easy one that the students that we would have would be able to relate to and come up with pretty quickly. The other one is, like I said, a picture of something that's important to you and then putting that reasoning behind it. It could be their grandma, it could be their dog. You know, there's just so many different variations from that people could probably relate to with when they're sharing. And then as far as the micro lectures, I guess knowing maybe what kind of content you're presenting, I might be able to give a better suggestion. But if it's because like it tends to be helpful if you're doing it in stages, right? You need to learn this part and then move on to this part. It's a lot easier to do that in micro lectures than something that's a long, complex topic. Maybe it could even be just one part of your complex topic that's hard for students to understand. Maybe you broke that part down into a micro lecture. That way they'd have like some additional maybe information on it or a different way of hearing it that might help the content resonate better with them.
Something else to think about with, let's say it's a 30-minute lecture. Put a slide somewhere between a couple of times saying pause. And it's not actually going to stop, but you're prompting the students to pause it and say pause and write down what makes sense and what you're going to ask questions about. And maybe they do it in a journal, maybe they do it on a discussion, or maybe it's an actual feature like UJA. You can have pauses or have questions that are just essay questions, but somewhere try to make them apply after 10 minutes or so what they're doing. And some students may just go through it, but at least you're making the attempt to do the pause, do some metacognitive reflection, and do some type of activity. Maybe just even go get a cup of coffee or something like that.
On the micro lectures, something that's worked for me, I'm lucky, I'm a disasterologist, so there's always a disaster somewhere, right? So every module gets an introduction on why this applies to the hurricane or the tornado in Enderlin, and because online my students are from all over, some of them are even in the Mediterranean, so I always have a disaster. So that's something that's worked for me. The other thing is to practice micro lectures because they're hard because you have so much to say. But in my getting started module, I make my students use discussion boards, and they're on small teams, and they do a lot of active learning in the online environment. And I split that up to each tool gets a micro lecture. So they get used to me doing that, and then I can refer them to those quote tutorials.
I love that. It also kind of gave me an idea too of like how we've been talking about real world examples, especially in the panel. Maybe your micro lecture could be a way of taking your full lecture and relating it to a real world experience type thing. That would be a micro lecture in itself.
Other questions?
So I work in the Department of Public Health, and we're really pushing toward hybrid classes and asynchronous classes, especially with our brand new MHA program that we are starting is going to be fully online asynchronous 8-week courses. Do you see a problem at all with the 5 to 10 minute micro lectures meeting the credit hours? So typically a 3-credit course, you're supposed to have 150 minutes each week of lecture. I'm just kind of curious if you have ever run into problems with that or any advice related to that.
There's been a lot of talk probably for the last 15 years about credit hours and time. It's really, I guess it's not my role to speak to that, but it's the work that they put in. It's the discussions, and there's, different universities put together a different analysis or matrices on what a discussion board would take, or a journal, or all of that. So if you're pairing up those micro lectures with activities and work for them to do, to me, that counts. And so look at what the work is. You're really packing it in an 8-week course, but you also really need to keep their attention. And that's where the micro lectures really help. I mean, if we look at the amount of data that shows for a 40-minute lecture on who's dropped out and quit watching, I mean, it's pretty significant. And so let's keep them, as Amber said, and not to continue the TikTok world, but understanding that we really need to keep them engaged. Other questions? Who's teaching online here? Raise your hand. Who's teaching on campus? So you're doing both, and that's kind of what's going on. Quite a difference in the amount of work you put in. You just don't take your on-campus course and say this is online. You, as Amber talked about, all the presents and everything, asking them who they are, getting connected, maybe 200-seat online courses, which is really scary. But you can still make those connections by doing the small groups, as we've heard, and a lot of different, doing the welcome messages, having them participate with audio and video also. Don't have the discussion just text. Use other media to engage your students and help them to share their voices and their experiences.
And just that being, like how she said, you can't just put it online. It's more important online to have that presence because you aren't there in person. So announcements is a great one. You can put audio and video into your announcements that go out to your students, just making all those different connections that you can, because you aren't going to be face to face with them. They need to feel your presence there as much as possible.
One of the really positive feedback messages that I get from my online classes that I do Brookfield's CATs, which are classroom assessment techniques. So every 2 weeks, they have a chance to give me what's muddy, what's working, what's not, what do you need more help with? But Ally in Blackboard, they don't know about it. And so I start the one of the first activities they do in week 0 to 1 is they have to play with Ally so that they can get things in audio format or they can get it translated. They can choose what they're going to do with Ally, but they have to do something, and then they have a reflection about it. I do the same thing with AI. I make them use AI in the first week on a syllabus activity. You've probably all heard about syllabus quizzes. I don't do that anymore. They get to make a graphic novel over a certain section that they find different or problematic, and they get to rewrite it for me using AI or explaining it to their small team. And then I also do a surviving a hack class because I teach 3 courses online every other semester, and 2 are core to our major, and all 3 are gen eds. And so there's always a group of students that have taken my courses before. And so I make it a point that a survivor is a member of every team. So they get to give tips on my idiosyncrasies.
I like the concept of thinking about survivor, but you're connecting, thinking about empathy to the student's world, that, okay, there are things going on in the student's life, and showing you're not just this antiquated instructor that's teaching, you know about survivor. And I know games were a really big thing for quite a few years. Ways you can put some fun things in your course and get them active. Great ideas. Thank you.
I will say the memorable one for me was I had a professor that every slideshow deck was a different theme that he loved, like a Grumpy Cat or Star Wars, or like even little things like that add your personality into the course. So whatever you can do to put yourself out there for your students, it'll make a difference.
Well, thank you, everyone. We had
Yeah,
fun.
we had fun.